As I've decided to move this channel in a more Xbox-focused direction, this aged well. Yeah, I think I've said this multiple times already, but I really need to stop saying that I'm moving in a certain direction, or that the next video will definitely be on a specific game. I just don't have the discipline for that, I guess. What I do have the discipline for, however, is playing through one game and talking about it. Discipline's still being used loosely here. On November 2nd, 2004, a very young game development studio in Amsterdam by the name of Guerrilla Games released its hotly anticipated first-person shooter game, Killzone. The lead up to this game's release had terms like Halo Killer being thrown around by the media, as many game developers of the time were trying to best Halo developer Bungie at their own game. Only thing is, there's a difference between calling your game a Halo Killer and calling your game a Halo Killer and releasing it a week before the game in question's sequel comes out. That's a whole different kind of confidence. Confidence that appeared to be misplaced, as Killzone received very mixed reviews upon release. I remember borrowing this game from a friend for a bit and not getting very far into it before giving it back to him. Granted, I was more of an Xbox person back then versus PS2, but I liked them both. Console agnostic here. Point is, I wasn't impressed with the game back then and have tried multiple times since then to get through this game. Having finally gotten through the game after all this time, I wanted to give my thoughts on it. Just to specify, I played the Killzone HD remaster done by Supermassive Games as part of the Killzone collection on PS3, and I'm also using an M Classic to clean up the image a bit. Killzone, as previously mentioned, is a first-person shooter that focuses primarily on cover-based combat. The game sets up cover all over its maps, with crates, sandbags, and tents being used to shield yourself as enemy fire rains down on you. I'm not exaggerating about that either. Get caught out in the open with more than one or two enemies staring you down, and you're done. You have a pretty small health bar in this game, which can be refilled with health packs that enemies sometimes drop, but in my experience, this felt like a coin flip at best. Sometimes groups of enemies would be hoarding these things, and other times I went long periods of time without ever seeing one. While the reality is likely not the case, I often found myself wondering if parts of this game were decided with the game flipping a coin or rolling a die in the background. Oh, you got tails? Sorry, you're gonna have to dump most of your clip into that one enemy to kill them. Rolled snake eyes? Looks like the tanks up ahead are gonna delete you from existence before you have a chance to take cover. Again, this probably isn't how it actually works, but it is how it felt to me while playing the game. Oh, looks like you drew the short straw. The debris from that tower is gonna randomly kill you now. Not helping things were some general design issues that I noticed. Killzone's mission structure is broken up into 11 chapters with a few levels within those chapters. You pick your squad mate at the beginning of the chapter and have to use them in each level within that chapter. Squad mates have certain advantages. Luger gets night vision and can crawl through small spaces. Haka can venture into special parts of the map where he can get the jump on the enemy. Rico gets his own special minigun, and Templar starts with one of the best rifles in the game with a secondary grenade launcher. I really like this idea in concept, but there are some execution problems. It seems like in some of the levels that it's clear that a certain squad mate was intended to be used. For example, there is this swamp level where I was constantly dying as Luger. It was an absolute slog to even get her close to the end of a single level. Then I backed out and switched to Rico and got through in one try. I found myself picking Rico more often than the rest in general, due to his minigun being so powerful, but I did try to use the other squad mates as much as possible. It's not so unbalanced that the other squad mates aren't fun to use, but Rico is the clear choice in any close to medium range fights. Not a horrible issue or anything, but still an issue. The most important design issue by a long shot, though, is the design of the levels themselves. Checkpoint placements are sometimes spaced well, but sometimes also spaced too far apart, or, at least in one case, not present at all. This can lead to very aggravating situations where you carefully, methodically take out your enemies one by one through a very long level, only to get stuck on a piece of geometry in a close quarter and die, only to respawn at the beginning of a level. Honestly, I almost stopped after that one. Additionally, enemy placement can be a bit hit or miss. While the game seems to advocate you taking your time and keeping to cover when possible, there are still sections where you round a corner and there's a Helgen surprise party waiting for you.
We got you bullets.
Finally, we have the gameplay itself, specifically speaking to the controls. I know that I have to look at this game in the context of it being developed in the early 2000s, but even in that context, this game is pretty janky. You might be looking at this footage and thinking, man, this guy really sucks at first-person shooters. Partially true, but regardless, this game has pretty awkward controls. Aiming and shooting is pretty clunky as you're constantly fighting with the right stick to recenter the reticle. Sometimes I didn't even bother to zoom in because it was easier to aim without it. Also, I'm not sure if other games do this, but Killzone doesn't let you move with the sniper rifle when it's zoomed in. I'm not sure why this was done, but it makes sniping really hard to do when you're under fire. Reloading is this weird slow animation where the player kind of looks down and to the right a bit as they reload. Melee is a really weird one too, as it is a button prompt that again triggers a melee animation that you get stuck in. You can take damage while you're doing this, by the way. Overall, while there are brief moments where it begins to flow and feel somewhat okay, Killzone for the most part feels incredibly rushed and not well tuned. While the gameplay lacks in a lot of areas, the presentation has its pluses. Killzone tells the story of an invasion of the human colony of Vecta by an authoritarian regime known as the Hellghast. A surprise attack by the Hellghast leaves the Vectans' orbital defenses disabled and the entire planet pretty much screwed. It's up to Captain Yan Templar of the ISA and his team of misfits to foil the Helgen plot and save planet Vecta from subjugation. Honestly, the plot of this game isn't bad at all. It's fine, not particularly captivating, but fine. It flows in a logical and clear direction, there's a plot twist thrown in there for good measure, and you generally have the feeling that throughout the game you are progressing towards something. My only issue here is with the cutscenes. This could have something to do with them being possibly untouched pre-rendered scenes, but these don't look great in the HD remaster. Some scenes have a heavy amount of pixelation going on, and the audio balance isn't great as the score borderline overpowers the voice lines sometimes.
Now those bases are too well dug in, we have to find another way.
Oh, really? Last time we listened to this guy, we got Helmet Man ripping us a new asshole.
We don't have any choice. We're running out of time. We gotta hit the base and pick up any transportation we can find.
I'm inclined to think that these scenes were just directly brought over from the PS2 version and not really touched up given these issues, and the fact that the actual game looks much better than this supports that idea. I do like the designs of most of the weapons though, like the ISA's assault rifle, the Helgen rifle, Rico's minigun, etc., and I like the design of the enemies themselves. The design of the Hellghast borrows heavily from that of Nazi Germany, with the Hellghast insignia being a pretty blatant reference. Their ideology also harkens to early communism. The Helgen people were exiled to a hostile and borderline uninhabitable planet decades prior to this game, and through their trials and tribulations came out the other side as a unified group of superhumans. The idea of a people suffering through immense hardship and coming out the other side under a single united rule with a strong emphasis on the needs of the collective definitely incorporates shades of either the former or current day communist nations. Still, the Nazi reference is still more blatant here as their leader, Skolar Visari, declares them to be a new, superior species to those living on Earth and Vecta. I think if we were to distill it down to a term, calling them space Nazis wouldn't be something that I would argue against. We'll see more communist imagery mixed in with the Hellghast when we get to their planet in the sequels. For now, we're on planet Vecta, and man, Vecta does not look particularly distinct. You get your war-torn battlefields, your bombed-out cities, your military bases, etc. The swamp level is a bit more varied, I guess, and I always dig a fight in a snowy military base. We also end up in a space station at one point, so that's pretty cool, even though it's mostly just corridors and shooting out the glass apparently does nothing. Overall, though, it's all kind of forgettable, and that critical no man's land has claimed other games before they had a chance to become something more. That's what's so interesting about Killzone 1, though. It wasn't claimed by that no man's land and went on to spawn an entire series. On its own, it's a game that has withered over the passage of time. It felt more frustrating than fun to play through this game, and I don't think I'll ever be playing it again. I think part of my inspiration to make this video came from the recent news that Killzone's standalone website had been shut down with little explanation offered by Guerrilla Games. Killzone as a series hasn't really been mentioned by Guerrilla since its most recent outing in 2013, and for some, its future is definitely in question. I would point to Killzone 1 as the cause of that, honestly. Given the comparison made by most, let's take Halo for example. You can boot up the Master Chief Collection today and you can experience a bunch of structurally sound, fun first-person shooter games. Halo 1 is not an exception to that, whereas if you were to bundle all of the Killzone games into a similar collection and bump them up to 60 frames per second, I wouldn't be able to say the same about Killzone 1. The series is imperfect in that way, and Killzone 1 is best avoided unless you really want to experience the series from start to end regardless of the issues. Playing it might also make you appreciate the sequels more as well. If I ever get to the other games in the series, I'm sure I'll be feeling that way myself. What do you think of Killzone 1 though? Please leave me a comment below. Also, if you like this video, then please give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, subscribing is always appreciated. Thanks everyone, happy gaming, and see you next time. Later.